Hey guys, I guess you're here for the next project, which means you're done with the sanding block and on for challenge number 2. The challenge for number 2 is to make a speaker box, a passive speaker for your cell phone. So your cell phone can actually sit in the top of this and project the sound out these holes. The inside of this will have to be custom made for your phone depending on whether you have a single speaker hole at the bottom or 2 speaker holes on either side. This one that I'm holding here looks like this in the middle, where this center section here is cut out and this noise travels kind of through here like this and then out. So the front of this particular one can be done in several different ways. This was the original design, just having 2 holes and a little area for the finger if you had like an iPhone. You can see the project here. This is made with different hardwood, so you can see the layers specifically. You can see this is 3 different layers of wood, so you're going to be making this out of 3 pieces. To do this project, the first thing you need to do is you need to find in the shop the blueprint for the project and the material or the operating procedures. So that can be found over here on the window next to the computer lab. If we come over here and look at the passive speaker order of operations, I've got one right here we can look at a little bit closer. The first thing we need to identify as we read through this is what machines do we need to use in order to build this thing. You're finally using machines. In fact, we're going to use a bunch of machines to do this. So the first machine we're going to use is the miter saw, then we're going to use a band saw, then we're going to use a drill press and the scroll saw, a spindle sander, and a router table, which means we need to take the safety test on all of these machines before we use them. You don't have to take them all at once. You can do just one machine, do that step, and then take the next safety test and do that step, or you can go through here and just watch all the videos, take all the safety tests, and get them out of the way. So that being said, the first safety test we need to take is the miter saw safety test. So you'll need to ask me for the test or find it in Canvas, depending on where it's located. I haven't decided as of this video yet. I'm probably going to give you guys a hard copy in the class you'll have to ask for. Then you'll fill out the test while watching this video, or a video, and then after that, you'll turn it in on Canvas by taking a picture of it and then turning in the hard copy so that I can give it back to you later at the end of the year for your portfolio. So let's start by taking a look at this test. This is the miter saw safety test. So you need to find this worksheet. It's a fill in the blank, and it's got a word bank at the bottom with all of the correct words and the correct spelling. So spelling does count. Please do that correctly. As we go through here, we're going to read all these questions. Let's go over to the miter saw so we can do this and save some time taking a look at the saw so you know what we're talking about. Alright, so this is the miter saw. Now let's take some closer look at some of the questions that we have on this particular saw. We need to know how to properly operate this thing and how to safely use it. So question number 1 here says, always have your eyes protected with ANSI Z87 rated, would be obviously safety glasses. You've got to make sure you have your eyes covered with safety glasses. Or better while using the miter saw. That's question number 1. Question number 2. Long material must be what? Blank to ensure proper contact with the blade and fence to prevent wood from settling and pinching the blade, resulting in kickback during a cut. So let's take a look at that. Right now I have a really short piece of wood here on the saw. This short piece of wood isn't hanging out over here and it's not going to fall down. However, if, let's back you up for a second, we had a really long piece of wood, what we could do is we could end up supporting that with this support out here. So let's take a long piece of wood. Let me set a long piece of wood down on here. Just take this stick, for example. Let's say this is being supported on the saw. It's pushed tight to the table, tight to the fence where it's being held, but then the out feed part of it here, or the extra, needs to be supported so it doesn't fall after this gets cut. Now, this is adjustable up and down. If this is not, let me drop this down. If this is too low at this point, let's take a closer look over here. If this right here is dropped all the way down, what you'll see if you come right here to the front of the saw, is just a gap right here. I can get my finger underneath it. In fact, here, I'll take this piece of wood right here. You can see there's a gap that I can stick this underneath here, about a 1/2 inch. So this needs to be supported on the other end so that this sits flat on the saw, because what will happen is if you cut this, this piece might fall with safety, that's fine, but if this isn't properly supported, this will want to move really quick and could hit the table or the fence and jump out at you. So the way that we do that, come over here, is this little knob right here gets loosened up, and we just lift this up and down, looking at the gap until the gap is gone. Tighten that down. Okay. Now when we come back over here, we see that this gap has been removed. Now there's a little bit of a gap here, really small at the end, because this board is really crooked. But where it's actually over the blade area, this is totally flat. And this is the part, this from here to here, on the circular part of the table here, this is what matters right here. Okay, so let's take a look at the next question. Before we do that, actually, let's take a look. Again, that was number 2, long material must be supported to ensure proper contact with the table and the fence, to prevent the wood from settling or pinching. So, I should actually also mention, if this is too high, okay, let me just put a block in here. If this is really high like this, causing the gap to be on this side, and let's say this is where you're holding it, when you go to cut this, the piece of wood's going to want to sag down, it's going to want to settle. And if this piece of wood wants to settle down while you're cutting it, let me grab a couple pieces of wood. Let's say you've got these 2 pieces here, okay? And you go to cut them right in the middle, but this is off the table, and when you go to cut them, they want to then settle like this. So if you take them at the same point and you drop them down, you'll see the corners at the top touch. If those 2 corners touch the blade, on either side of this blade, when the blade comes through it, what they're going to do is they're going to hold that blade tight and they're going to grab it like the brakes of a car, and then that energy from this saw and from the motor needs to be transferred somewhere. That transfer is either going to kick this thing forward at you and it's going to cause the saw to bind, or it's going to take this piece of wood and it's going to want to throw it, and it'll hit you in the stomach if you're not holding on to it securely. So to prevent that, all you have to do is verify and ensure that this wood is held tight to this table and tight to the fence before any cut is being made anywhere in here near the blade. Then you don't have any settling. Okay, so number 2 is supported. Number 3, always secure the material against the table and the fence while making cuts. We just kind of covered that. Make sure you're supporting, and make sure you're supporting with the non-crossing hand. We'll talk about that in a second. Never alter a safety device or use the tool without a working guard. Guard is the answer for number 4. This here is the guard. It covers the blade. And to be working, what that means is, see how it moves out of the way when I pull down on it? It automatically takes care of itself. If it doesn't automatically close and it's spring-loaded, then it's damaged. We need to fix it before you use it. Okay, number 5. Let's take a look at the next one. Be sure angle mechanisms are tightened securely before making cuts. So angle mechanisms, that means a couple different things. If the saw is set to 90 degrees, this little red arrow should be at 1, and the saw doesn't move here, okay? If I push down on this little button right here, I can change the miter angle, and it usually will click in at common measurements, okay? We don't want this to be loose to where I can move this while I'm cutting. It needs to be securely locked into a position. If I need a position that's in the middle of a locked or common position, I can push down on this knob at the end and it'll lock it, okay? Lift back up on that one, go back over to 0. The other thing is this blade will tilt. So there's a knob on the back here. If I loosen that knob, which I'm not going to do right now, that would also be a problem while cutting. You want to make sure that's all tight. Everything should be secured. If you're not sure, just have your instructor check it before you start working. Okay, number 6. Be sure all guards are in place and working properly before use. Yep. Number 7. When you start your saw, allow the blade to reach full speed before the workpiece is contacted. If the saw is not running at full speed, what will happen is that blade instead of cutting the wood, will grab it and it'll kick it back against the fence and it'll throw it at you. So always make sure you're at the full speed up here. I'm going to turn it on. And then come down. Don't come down and do that at the same time. You want to start the saw, let it get to full speed, and then make your move, which is going to be a pull, a down, and then a push all the way back, holding it down until the blade stops all the way. Okay, let's see. If the blade stops rotating, or if the motor sounds like it's straining, that's the answer, release the trigger switch immediately to reduce the risk of damage to the saw or kickback. Okay? You can hold the thing still, hold your material in place, and just let go of the trigger. Let your hand come off the trigger. Next, never remove, that's the answer, remove the saw from a cut while the blade is rotating. When making a partial cut, or if the power is interrupted, release the trigger switch immediately. Don't remove the saw from the workpiece until the blade has come to a complete stop. A sawtooth could grab the workpiece, causing loss of control. So, if you guys are making a cut on something, just pretend like we're cutting this 2x4 right here. This is being securely held in place. You have start the saw all the way up. It's going at full speed. You're going to pull out. You're going to come down. You're going to push in. And then you're going to take your hand off the trigger here. This is the trigger right here. Okay? When you take your hand off that trigger, you let the saw come to a complete stop. When there's no more noise and everything stopped moving, then you can lift this, let it go, and then remove your workpiece. Number 10, release the switch immediately if the blade binds or the saw stalls. Number 11, never reach under the saw blade or perform cross-handed operations. When your left hand is supporting the workpiece on the right side of the blade. Let me show you. So if I am a right-handed person and I need to make this cut where this piece of wood is over here on the front saw, I'm not going to hold this with my left hand, stand over here and cut this, because as I'm talking, see how my arms are crossing? If I were to drift this way, I'm now cutting my wrist and I'm not cutting the workpiece. It's the same thing over here. I wouldn't want to, if I'm left-handed and I want to grab the saw with my left hand, I don't want to cut like this, because now I'm potentially going to cut my arm if I'm not paying attention. It's a bad habit to get into if you get on a job site and you've been cutting for hours. You always want to make sure if the wood is on the left side, you hold it with the left hand and you cut up here. If your wood is on the right side, you hold it with the right hand and your left hand operates the saw. This is a saw you got to get comfortable using with two hands, either side. Number 12, the support hand should hold the material firmly against the fence and downward from the area above the solid table that is at least 6 inches from the blade. Okay? Make sure your hand, there's a little sign here, okay? Your hand should not come in past this area. This part of the table that's round here is a no hand zone, okay? Your hand should be on this solid area, over the top of the solid areas. A sliding compound miter saw should start its cut by pulling the saw arm towards the operator over the material and then plunge into the material, cutting away from the operator. Number 13 is away. Okay? Again, you start it up, you pull out, you come down, you push in, then you release the trigger, let it come to a complete stop. Number 14, a compound miter cut is when the blade is tilted from plumb, that's perfectly vertical, that's what plumb means, and left or right of 90 degrees from the fence at the same time. I'll demonstrate a cut. So if we were to tilt this blade a little bit like this, okay, turning the saw over, and turn it like this, now that is a compound miter cut. If we were to leave the blade upright at 0 and just turn like this, that is just a miter cut, it's not compound. Number 15, a miter cut is when the blade is held plumb while cutting left or right of 90 degrees. Number 16, do not lift the saw arm until the blade has completely stopped. This will reduce the possibility of splinters and throwing small cut-off pieces. When you're cutting a small piece of wood, the teeth on the blade are a little thicker than the cheek of the blade. So when your piece of wood is against it after you just cut it, if you lift this, the saw blade can lift up on the piece and throw the little cut-off piece that's probably on the other side, it'll throw it at somebody without you knowing. So we always want to hold that down. It also reduces the splintering on your wood to make your wood nicer and requires less work to clean it up. 17. Always unplug the saw before making any changes or adjustments to the blade. If you got to make an adjustment or change, come get me. Don't do that. Number 18. But remember, if you're working on a tool, any tool at home, always unplug it first. No power should be going to that machine. Number 18. If a stop block, stop is the answer, stop block is being used to produce multiple parts the same size, the material between the block and the blade must be larger than 12 inches and supported. So, if you're using a stop block, like let's say this block here is clamped to the table so that you can cut a bunch of pieces that are, let's say you need a bunch of pieces this size, and I put a clamp here, and I have a big board and I bring it down in here, and I'm cutting these out, and I take this away and I bring in another piece and I cut it out so that they're all the same. This piece has to be at least 12 inches long to get your hand far enough away from it. Otherwise you have to use a clamp to hold it. And you need to support this piece. You can't hold it over here with one piece that's not being supported, that is trapped between the blade and the block. You can't have a piece trapped there. It has to be a supported piece or this will get thrown. Number 19, sorry. Always make certain that there are no gaps between the workpiece, the fence, and table along the line of the cut. So, are there no gaps? That's fine. Always make sure there are no nails or foreign objects in the workpiece. Okay? So obviously you don't want to cut a nail in my saw. This is for cutting wood, not metal. Hopefully you got everything down and you're going to get 100% on this quiz because I just gave you all the answers. That should be easy. Finish filling it out. Make sure your name, date, and period is on this thing before you take your picture to turn it in. All right, on to the next one.